games, like the first ones Halak played, where he was bad.
Oh, I'd say the first 20% of the season, Halak was like unexpectedly bad.
Basically, early in the season, there were several games where they lost because Halak didn't have his shit together yet. Now he's decent enough, right?
Now he's above median, I'd say.
He's now I got no problems with him. But early in the season, he was poop before he got his shit together.
I think we definitely lost. The Rangers lost games they would have won if someone else had been in goal.
The point is, if we had won just one of those games, we'd be now tied, probably I think ahead of the Devils on tiebreakers, maybe.
Yeah.
And then if we had won 2 of those games, we'd be in first place in the Metro right now.
Which would be, yep.
Right. So it's like, the Rangers, I think, as they currently are, not only taking into account trades at the deadline.
Yeah. I see a skirt in the line of not saying something that will curse them, but I see where you're going with this.
Right. Taking into account trades at the deadline and Halak not sucking anymore, they are better than the standings indicate they are.
Yep.
Right, at the present time. The standings are an average of the entire season. But if you say, well, how good are they right at this moment? They're better than their season average was.
You said that in the most New York sports fan possible way to avoid complications.
Well, I mean, you got to remember also the Devils, right? Who beat us every time.
Yep.
Now they got Timo Meier, the best player available at the deadline, right?
Yeah.
Like we got Tarasenko and Kane. It's like Timo Meier's better than them by a lot.
Yep. So. But Kane has had some time to gel with the team at least.
Yeah.
All right. Anyway, I think we can get started. Everything's good.
They just didn't have cap space for him, nor could they trade for him because he still has term on his contract.
It's Monday, April 10th, 2023. I'm Rim.
I'm Scott.
And this is Geek Nights. Tonight, we're talking about fonts from a technology standpoint. All right. Throw in any opening bit you got.
It's finally not cold.
Oh my God. I biked to work this morning. I biked home just now.
I looked at the weather reports. I thought Wednesday was going to be the day, but it moved up and now Tuesday. I mean, it was cold this morning, but it's now not cold. And it looks like even tonight, the low it says 59. So that's only a little cold.
Well, what's fascinating to me is you'll notice if you go back to old Geek Nights episodes, you hear us talk about the weather because warm today was a Geek Nights meme for a reason. So about 5 years ago, the climate in New York kind of had a radical sudden shift, and I think this spring has been exactly what the last 3 springs have been, and not how they used to be, where we have winter. And then when spring starts, spring is basically now in New York. It's just like 3 weeks of radically shifting weather, and then it's suddenly summer. It's like it'll be 70 degrees, 40, 75, 40, 80, 20, and then it'll like settle into upper 70s. I mean,
it says the high on Thursday and Friday will be 82 and 85. It's like, all right. Anyway, the actual non-weather opening bit. So we're sitting around this past weekend. No plans whatsoever. And I'm like, I don't really want to sit inside all day, even though it's a little bit cold, right? I'm in New York City. There should be something to do, right? It should not be challenging to find something to do. And I was like, I'm looking around and I'm like, oh, I saw on the subway, there were some ads for something at the Brooklyn Museum, some fashion guy, right? And there was like, you probably seen them, like this picture of a bug lady.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, all right, let's, you want to just go? And we went over there. Right? And basically, there was the person, I guess, I don't know how to pronounce their name properly, Derry Mugler, I guess. It's THIERRY space MUGLER, and there might be something on that U. But basically, was a famous fashion person, also even made perfumes and stuff. And they passed away somewhat recently, but shortly before they passed away, there was a exhibit put together by, I think, the Montreal Museum, I guess. And now it's moving around, and it's at the Brooklyn Museum and for like another month or so, right? And, it's mostly like runway fashions and, theater fashions, right? The kind of ridiculous stuff that you see someone wear to like, a red carpet or.
Yep. Which, full disclosure, like I'll admit openly, I love that shit.
Oh, yeah. So if you love that shit, you should go head down there because they've got like hundreds of these, like, costumes and outfits and, mostly dresses and stuff that have basically, were worn once and then were put into some storage somewhere.
So, fun fact, at my 2 companies ago, so this is already a long time ago, that company sponsored Fashion Week, and we got a lot of access and perks and things way back then that they gave to all of us lowly regular employees.
Yeah, but it's a lot different to see. It's obviously one thing to see it, someone wearing it and moving around and whatnot. And there's videos and stuff in the exhibit, showing you who was wearing it and when, and photos and a lot of that. But the thing being on a mannequin. And you can actually get close and look at it, right? And see what's up with it, much more closely than you, I guess, ever could ever, right? It's like you're not going to get close to the famous person wearing it. You're going to see it from far away.
Yeah, you're not going to be close enough to be like, wow, I literally can't see the stitching. How the fuck did they do that?
Well, no, that's what I was actually going to say, right? It's like the cosplayers should actually feel pretty good because I got, you get close to a lot of this stuff and it's like, the design of it and, the way it looks is incredible. But it's like a lot of it, you get close to it and it's clearly very fragile. They clearly made something that would only work one time, right? It's held together by like, it's like...
It's the F1 car of a dress.
Exactly. That's what this stuff, like I saw, it's like when you get close to it, it's like, yeah, you can clearly see that like this was not, some of the stuff isn't, perfect, right? But you can't tell from far away, right, that it's not perfect. It's still just, some incredibly unique and amazing clothing. The coolest section, I thought they had a section of, very fembot styled clothing.
Ooh, I'm really also a fan of fembot style.
Of course, a lot of that was clearly, uncomfortable boob armor, but that, and you could see also by looking at the clothing how unrealistically small the person who wore it had to be. it's like no, like, only a child or a model can fit into any of this stuff, right? And then there was the like animal section where like, the bug clothing, the peacock clothing, etc. Right? The put this on and you look like a motorcycle, literally. There was one cool I think the only thing that was in there that I think I would have worn, there was like these there was a set of clothing, one for a man body and a woman body, shaped body. And it looked like the kind of clothing that someone would wear in like, some sort of space station somewhere in between like a Logan's Run and Cloud City, right? Style with like, people walking around in the space station with capes and whatnot.
So I have seen occasional people kind of dressed adjacent to that as those handful of brands that make...
You saw Lando Calrissian walking down the street and it wasn't an anime convention?
It wasn't quite to the Lando level, but it was like 40% of a Lando.
This is the Lando level.
Yeah. I want that style to come back for real. There's a few brands that actually make actual wearable clothes that are closer. They look like Assassin's Creed kind of stuff. I feel like we just need that trend to continue and we can dress like Lando. Or... we have money. You want to just get Lando stuff and just dress like that from now on?
The other problem, I don't think it would look good.
I think we could pull it off. I think we could both pull it off.
I think it looks good if you're in the right setting.
I don't know. You gotta the way
the exhibit is that all the clothing is in an appropriate setting that matches. If you take it out of that setting, it just looks ridiculous.
But if enough people start dressing like Lando, Lando becomes the fashion.
Sure.
I'm just saying, I'll Lando if you Lando, but I'm not gonna Lando alone.
It's also not really practical, right? It's like the shit doesn't have pockets. You can't. It's got like giant shoulders and other ridiculous stuff. It's like you can't. It's hard to go about.
And I gotta say, as much as I like capes, why was my father with a guy in a cape? Having worn an actual for-real cape a lot in marching as a high school kid, capes are actually super fucking annoying to wear. They are such a pain.
Especially all of these clothings, right, are only practical to wear if you're on a runway, at a red carpet, at a gala where you don't have to hold anything, and you have like a someone to take care of your shit for you. The only thing you get to hold is a drink.
Yep.
Right.
All right. Tell you what.
You're no sitting, no laying.
Scott, I'll make a pact with you now. If there is ever a situation, just saying, where you and I are both attending something that qualifies as red carpet, if you want to Lando, I'll Lando too.
Yeah, we'll go and find. Well, you can spend your money on getting some famous fashion design.
I will Lando the both of us because I'm not Landoing by myself, and I would like to Lando. But it'll have to be an actual red carpet above the line.
I mean, the price that you have to pay to donate to the Met to get gala tickets in the first place, the cost of the clothing would not really compare.
Yeah. I mean, I would not be going to that. I can't imagine what's the least red carpet that would qualify as red that you and I could get access to. You
would have to premiere a movie or a show.
There's minor red carpets. There's that red carpet to get into the lounge at London Heathrow.
But it's like, yeah, there are red carpets about, but it has to be one specifically where there's paparazzi waiting for this event. And there's people crammed on the sides.
I feel like the best we could do.
You get to pull up and go down the red carpet. And
the best we could do
and go in,
because there is another kind of venue that does that, and that is the club or the music venue where rich people are going in very specific circumstances, like the fancy club that has the special concert.
What if?
Oh, man, that's what our gaming con is, the red carpet gaming con? Is that what we're going to make?
I mean, it could be a thing that happens at a con, right? Like a special, event at a specific time.
We invite Friedman Freeze, and we make sure he's fancied up, and he comes in on the red carpet.
We make a red carpet, and, cosplayers come up and get out and come down we basically set up a red carpet. But
that's way more achievable.
It doesn't have to even be at a con. We could just be like, event in New York, right? The red carpet for no reason at all, right? It's like, come, buy a ticket, right? And that funds the event. And anyone who buys a ticket,
even better,
anyone who buys a ticket can roll up and walk down the red carpet. There'll be people taking photos. They'll get interviewed, and then they'll get a photo in front of the thing with our logo on it, and then they can go in, and then that's the end, right? You buy a ticket just to do that, and there's no other event. That's it. Just
even better.
Pretend to come down a red carpet, buy a ticket, and you get to live.
If we
experience.
did that, like we rented the front of Cipriani for a day just to do it, a crowd of people who don't know that it's just like a bit would definitely gather.
We don't have to hire extras to come in. We just need like a couple photographers, right?
Yeah, the extras will make themselves. We could
even, since it's not really harmful, we could also lie, right?
Oh yeah, straight up.
We could send a press release to the news, right? we could even, let Rim, the expert on lying without lying, write something like, red carpet event, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, for the premiere of, it'll be written in such a way that halfling is definitely not going to be arrested by the wizard police.
Right. Yeah.
That's actually a joke, an inside thing that predates you. But the moment where my previous friend group before I went to RIT realized that I can confabulate that well in the right circumstances without actually lying was specifically playing D&D at an event, and I got out of being arrested by the wizard police entirely in character. So the listener suggests the Fresh Fashion by Friedman Freeze. So in the news, this is breaking news. It just happened. It was just announced. It's sad. Al Jaffee, an absolute legend, basically like the illustrator that made Mad Magazine what it was.
There were other people.
There was, but Al Jaffee is.
I think Al was the guy who, he was the living embodiment of Mad Magazine, and he outlived them all, basically.
Yeah.
Right? So in outliving them all, he sort of, in his name, he carries the torch for all the others.
Yeah. If you don't know if you think you don't know who Al Jaffee is,
about him literally every time it's his birthday.
Yep. Click on this link, and if you see
like 90 something,
if you see any piece of art that this man made himself, you'll realize, oh, it's that guy. Like you'll know who it is. You've seen this everywhere.
Yeah.
Mad Magazine.
Does it fold together and then another image appears?
So he died at 102. So he had a good run. But that I could make it to 102.
That means he was born in 1921.
Yeah. Mad Magazine was started.
In the 50s, he was 30.
Yep. Mad Magazine started in the 50s, I want to say.
Yeah,
I should actually look it up.
30-something in the 50s. When he was our age, it was still the 60s. There were still 20 more years before we were even going to be born yet.
Yep. Mad Magazine, first issue, October, November, 1952.
Yep. But it's like, not only did he live long and see all that shit that you could see in 100 years plus, right? But he remained the person that he was after seeing all that shit.
Yep.
Right? And that's not even that, right? Just that alone is a noteworthy and significant life. Not even counting all of the artworks he created. Right?
Yep.
So
also, never mind the fact that Mad Magazine was surprisingly important to pop culture in a way that modern people who are young might not recognize because it's long gone. But Mad Magazine was an institution.
Mm-hmm.
It shaped my political.
It's gone. It's somewhat recently gone.
Well, I would say it was effectively gone in the 90s. Like, it really started to fall apart.
You know.
There was Mad TV, which was actually better than people remember. It's kind of a shame it failed, but I digress. But anyway, pouring out for a legend, Al Jaffee, Godspeed, buddy, 102. In much sadder news, relatively recently.
What could be sadder than that?
This is sadder than that in a very focused way. So in most of America, for a long time, pretty much in most states, the majority of all cars on the road are trucks. That's just for reasons. But
technically classified as trucks.
Yes. Now, for a long time, that was mostly very rural places because most people in America, the vast majority of humans in America, did not ever own or drive a truck. They drove a regular small car on a car chassis, and if you needed to carry a bunch of people with you, you had a station wagon. Like, that was America.
Well, I think there was a leveling up, right? So it started as, if you were just one person, you had like a two-door car because you'd occasionally have a passenger.
Yep.
Right?
Four-door cars used to be more expensive than two-door cars.
Right. And then, because two-door cars are usually fast, sporty cars, right? And then, when you were a family, right? Your family got a Ford, Taurus, a sedan, a four-door car, right? A long one.
If you're a big family, you got a station wagon, or maybe you got a
eventually,
van.
Right? The station wagon became a thing, right? And then after that, the minivan became a thing in like the 90s. I remember everyone had Ford Tauruses. And when they all got rid of them and got Ford Windstar.
Yep, it was either the Windstar or there was another one. We couldn't afford the Windstar as a family, so we got the fucking Astro, like the bad one.
Yeah, but it's like basically everyone had Tauruses, and then they changed to the minivan, right? But the minivan was never, even though it was so practical, for a large family, right? If you had at least 3 children, if you only had 2 children, you could go with the sedan. It was not necessary, right? But if you had 3 or more, right, it was just, and you were, buying into cars, you weren't anti-car or anything. The practicality and convenience of it, made sense.
And a lot of people, to their credit, because something changed in America that really broke this situation, a lot of families, if they could afford it, would have a minivan that they only used when they had to take the whole family somewhere or move something big, and they had another small car to drive most of the time.
We had a big car and a small car. My dad would take the small car to work, and the other car was, right,
So this article, the Washington Post, has a pretty...
And then the SUV came along and was like, hey, all you minivan people, you've been riding those minivans because they're so practical and you can carry your whole family in them, right? Even though most of the time, even the minivan only had one person in it, right?
Yeah.
Only some. But then they were like, but the whole time you've been driving that minivan, it's not cool. No one feels cool driving it. And it's like, we have made the SUV. It's
just a minivan.
It's a minivan.
It's a worse minivan.
All right, it's a minivan or a pickup truck that we made a different shape so that you don't feel uncool riding it. But it's it's the same, except you actually had less space in those SUVs than in minivans, so they were actually worse. And they're higher up and harder to get into.
Yep. So
And less fuel efficient.
It is true.
Dangerous to everyone outside of them.
It is true.
And
we've talked about this on Geek Nights many times. I'm not going to belabor the point that the primary reason Americans pretty much buy exclusively SUVs to this day is because those are the most advertised cars, and the car companies really push SUVs over all other forms of cars.
Yeah. Car ads work whether you believe it or not. And basically, they can tell people what to buy. People in a lot of places have to buy a car.
Yep.
They end up buying the one the advertisement told them to buy, the one that's available, right? And, they might not, admit that, like, I bought this, it's like they say, oh, I got it because I like it. Why do you like it? Because an ad made you like that.
Yep.
Right? So
this article, because in America, relatively recently now, in every state, SUVs and light trucks are the majority of all cars. The last holdouts were Rhode Island, New Jersey, New York, and Connecticut.
Mm-hmm.
Those were the only places in all of America where there were more cars than trucks on the road at any given time. They have fallen. Trucks are the majority. And in red states, they're like 80+% of all cars now. It is nuts. So this article is a very long form sort of explanation, mostly because it has a lot of citations and links to other resources if you want to like dig more into this about. It's not asking why did Americans buy SUVs, because we know why, ads. It's asking the question, why specifically did every car company in America so aggressively push SUVs to the exclusion of everything else? And the short version of this is,
it's a reason I already knew.
Yeah,
right?
but
it's an old, but
yeah, it's a reason that a lot of people knew, and there's a lot of data around it. But this brings it all together pretty succinctly, and also there's new evidence and specific data from recent years showing exactly how this went down. America regulates cars in a way where if something is classified as a truck, it can be less safe and less fuel efficient. So every car manufacturer said, fuck the world, fuck America, fuck people, fuck the environment. We are going to skirt the regulations to the maximum extent and act in bad faith and sell nothing but light trucks. Right. And we're going to make sure every car we make is a light truck.
Well, the real question is like, not that, it's like there was this loophole, basically, right? To say, if you make a car that's there's rules that were in law that say this is what classifies a car in this category. This is what classifies a car in that.
You're not going to like the answer, but keep going.
Yeah. And then they said, all right, well, if a car is in this category, it has to be X efficient, right? It's like if a car is in this category, well, obviously that's a big truck category that has to be less efficient.
Yep.
Right? We can't, it's not reasonable to expect someone who makes a giant truck, which does need to exist for the person who legitimately needs giant truck. We can't ask them to make giant truck 60 miles a gallon. It's just not going to be possible, right? That would basically be legislating those vehicles out of existence. And so they wrote those laws in that way. Now, the question is, right, when they wrote those laws in that way, right, did they or did anyone who was involved in the making of those laws, lobbyists, representatives, staff, anyone, right, was this just an oopsie, or was this somehow foreseen and intentional?
You're not going to like this answer because there's actually
evil parties, right? Where the car companies like, oh yeah, you can pass that legislation. Yeah, that one actually, we see the loophole already. That's not going to stop us. You can pass that one. Go ahead. Right?
So there are effectively 3 reasons why this happened. One of them you're not gonna like. I'm saving that one for last.
We know it's evil.
No, I mean you personally, Scott Rubin, are not gonna like the third one when I say it, and you're gonna go, when I say it.
It's an evil reason.
But one reason is a lot of our regulations and laws and just things are old, and some of the stuff dates back to the 40s and like chicken shit, like chicken trucks and stuff, and like tariff wars with Europe. So there's just a lot of inertia to change things like that. The second reason was basically all the politicians who are paid off by the car industry had to make sure there was a loophole, or they would have lost all their donors from the car industry.
Why did they just do nothing? Why did they just leave?
Because they needed the victory of saying, look, we're going to make cars fuel efficient. And everyone celebrated it because those rules, also the safety rules, were really important. Cars used to kill. Yeah, as much as cars kill people today,
it's guns and cars are the killers.
Yep. But anyway,
Kill all the people.
you want to know the third reason? The Senate is now paralyzed in a way that it wasn't when the first.
That's a reason why you can't change it now. I'm talking about what happened when the most recent car safety.
Even the
laws
most
were
recent car laws needed to be able to get past the Senate filibuster to pass.
When were they made?
2004 seems to be the last time anything
so what were the
significant.
discussions that were had in 2004 were the lobbyists saying.
Oh, none of that's public. I don't think there's any way to know that.
Right. But that's what I'm saying is that, was this, a good faith loophole, like they didn't realize that the car companies would do that, or was it, hey, the car company lobbyists already knew the strategy?
I would argue
they already were imagining the SUV world in 2004.
As someone who is not an expert on car regulation, but actually is an expert on capital markets regulation professionally, in my personal professional opinion, but not the opinion of my employer, regulators usually do anticipate loopholes, and in functioning regulatory frameworks, they document them and they wait and see. And as soon as the first person actually takes advantage of an obscure loophole, they immediately correct it. The reason none of these loopholes have been corrected, because a lot of these laws are from 1978, and the Senate has been paralyzed since about 1994, 95. So none of these regulations can ever be changed again. So the regulators, who probably have a whole list of here's all the ways they're going to try to get around it so we can play whack-a-mole when they actually do, which is before anyone says, why don't you just put those all in the law to begin with? That's too hard. That is actually too hard. You cannot deal with every loophole. It is better like hockey. Hockey rules change all the time. Someone figures out some bullshit, and then they're like, all right, there's a rule against that specific bullshit.
Well, I mean, on the one hand, there is some truth to you can't possibly anticipate everything. You need to have the ability to change the rules once you realize someone else smarter than you figured out something, right?
Yep.
But on the other hand, I see this a lot in game design, right? Is like the game testers or like the pro players.
No, yeah, I agree.
They figure shit out on like not even day zero, like minute zero, as soon as like some new card in a card game or some new patch to an FPS comes out or a new map, like they figure out the exploit within 5 minutes. And it's like when they figure out the loophole that quickly, that is either incompetence or lack of effort.
Yeah, so to be clear,
okay.
With the regulatory whack-a-mole applies to the actual edge cases, the things that are difficult to codify in law, not like babies first. What if they just make a new class of car that's exempt from all regulations? Like that's babies first bullshit. But
exactly.
The reason none of this has changed is because the Senate has been paralyzed, and a lot of this stuff goes back to 1978. So this article should just radicalize you further against cars. In our final news tonight, we were really excited about the Apple M1 and M2 chips, and the whole world was excited about it. We're also
they're
M2,
this MacBook Air M2 that I got for my new job, at least almost 1-year-old job, I guess.
Oh, fantastic technology. Amazing technology.
Like, if I wasn't going to play a video game in my life or run any Windows-only software in my life, right? It's like, this thing is unbelievable. It's better at the things that it can do, right?
Yep.
that my personal computer can also do. It is better at them, right? The only thing is my personal computer can do additional things.
Yep.
So,
but
because it runs Windows.
Also, in parallel, we noted on some multiple recent episodes of Geek Nights that, well, basically the entire technology sector on Earth has been laying people off like crazy. Apple somehow wasn't. Well, that's
not true anymore. Apple laid off a little bit. They're like, you can see that Apple is like cutting costs in other ways, and they laid off a few, I think, like some retail executive type people and some other thing. But it's like Apple is at least holding back on the layoffs as much as they can, which I think is wise.
Yep. I mean, my current company, we're hiring. We're not firing. We're hiring. Not a ton of people, but we're still hiring. But McDonald's is also laying off a bunch of people, so watch out. That's not a great sign either, I don't think. But
that's a bad one.
Yep. Mac sales are down 40%. That's a big number.
Right. Well, that's a trailing indicator, right? So I think it's telling a story of something that's already happened, right? So basically, there was the pandoodle and people went to work from home, right? And when people were working from home, they all went out and bought computers.
Yep.
Right?
A lot of my coworkers had to buy computers. A terrifying number of professionals do not own an actual computer at home.
Right. Well, it's not just, and I think it's not, I think that individuals these days clearly are not buying computers in great number. The only people who are buying computers for themselves, I think in large, significant numbers, right, are gamers who aren't buying Apple computers.
Yep.
Right. And, creators, artists, developers, people.
Professionals, people making games and making entertainment.
And I think the largest number of computers now, desktops, whether Apple or otherwise, besides the gaming ones, that are being bought are actually being bought by companies, right?
Well,
Companies
guess who just laid everyone off? All the tech companies that were buying all these computers.
All these tech companies laid people off. They either just let people keep the computers or they get them returned to the company.
There are so many cheap new computers for sale in the secondary market right now.
So all these tech layoffs have resulted in a big glut of either people just got a free work computer that's now theirs, or companies have the remaining IT staff, flashing and backing up all these computers from laid off people, and if any new employees come in, they get one of those. So or they resell those used on the market, and now so the demand for and people are going back to offices or whatever. I guess sometimes. I don't know, but the point is, overall, the demand for desktop and laptop computers right now is way down, and it's been down for a while, and that downness has caught up to the point where now, you're actually getting the reports of how down it's been. It's been so down that Apple says 40% less sales on Mac computers, right? And also Apple has basically stopped making M2 chips.
Now that is huge. I really need to.
They've made enough to satisfy the demand so they're rather than cut costs by laying Apple employees off, they're cutting costs by not making chips that no one's gonna buy.
So my first real job, when I worked at IBM, was
a while ago. It's just now that this is right.
So my first real job was in a fab, like a chip fab, making chips for like PlayStations and shit. That was actually my job. If you listen to old Geek Nights, I talk about it a lot. And the technology that I was personally responsible for was stuff that would collect data to calculate yields, like what percentage of these wafers actually turn into a chip versus fail, that kind of stuff. There is the difference between slowing down a production line and halting a production line is more enormous than you can possibly imagine. Actually stopping a production line is a big fucking deal because they are not easy to start up again.
Right. Well, TSMC, these are all these chips are made by TSMC, right? The most important company on earth.
Yeah, but so a pipeline.
They're losing, they're not doing, they're down right now, right? Because there's less demand for the chips, but they'll just have that line make something else.
So it is
in good time.
Retooling. Now again, one caveat is my knowledge of fab stuff is about a decade and change old.
The way TSMC works is basically every other company in the world, your Apples, your Intels, your AMDs, your whoever, right? I guess Intel has their own fabs, but everyone else, right, who doesn't have their own fab, designs chips, right? And you send your designs to TMC, and then they make the chip. They actually make the silicon wafer part for you, right? So, Apple designs the M2 chip, sends it over. They produce it. Obviously, Apple's biggest customer, one of the biggest customers, right? But it's that fab isn't just a dead fab that can't do anything at all now, right? It's either A, eventually Apple will put in a new order, and it'll take some time to get it going, or B, it can do some other customer's work. It might not gonna be overnight, right? But
retool it. So within a large chip manufacturer like that, from my understanding, retooling a line is a very lengthy, very expensive process, and yields tend to go absolutely into the gutter with a newly tooled line.
Well, it depends what you mean by retooling, right? It's if you're talking about changing it from one X nanometers to a different nanometer. It's like that's basically it seems like TSMC, when they do that, they just make a whole new fab. They don't seem like I've never seen a news that was like, they've changed this fab from this many to this many.
Well, usually you have a fab, and within a fab you have multiple channels or pipelines, and some of those channels and pipelines will share technology. Like they'll share the same sintering furnace, but not all of them will. Some of them will have a specialized function that other ones don't use.
Read the SMC news, right? It's always like they're starting up a new fab in this place. It makes these kinds of chips. And it seems like they've split it up to where each building makes a certain category of chip. And so as long as someone designs a chip in that category, then the fab seems capable of, producing it. But when it's a customer like Apple, they'll often dedicate the entire fab to like that one customer. So, it's possible for, I guess, that fab to do something else, but some other customer would have to order an M2 like chip.
But that's sort of what's actually worrying me, is not the chip thing, but like the chip fab side of it, like the black start of a manufacturing line or whatever, but more that if the entire sector is collapsing, then who is even gonna want that existing now idle fab capacity in the first place except militaries? And the only way out of this I see is if the whole Taiwan-China thing actually blows up for real, then we'll see what happens. But this does not bode well.
Basically, if China tries to go in, right, because TSMC is in Taiwan, right?
Yep.
Most of it. Anyway, most of their fabs are there, right? Basically, if China goes in and tries to take the fabs, they would just ruin them, right?
Yep.
Not Taiwan would ruin them and be like, oh, you can't have them now.
I mean, the U.S. just did war games, and they showed that pretty definitively, while the war would be horrific, there is no possible way to occupy permanently Taiwan.
Right. Nobody can take... the only way for those fabs to continue operating and continue to provide value is to leave Taiwan be, right? If anyone tries to mess with Taiwan, they'll just basically, ruin their own shit and be like, oh, you can't make chips now. What'd you conquer? Nothing. You conquered a bunch of worthless crap, right? Good luck.
Like in Civ. Oh, here's my extremely unhappy city where I sold every building over the last 10 turns.
Exactly. So
enjoy.
That's not a concern, right? I guess it's a concern where if it happens, then the chip supply will be in dire straits, right?
Well, let's
for everybody.
Yeah, it's that situation is actually pretty.
But I'm not worried about that. I'm more worried about, will companies continue to advance, right, for nerds who want, and workers who want faster, better desktop computers, right? Will Apple, Intel, Nvidia, other companies continue to invest in improving that technology? Are we going to get to a point where Intel's like, you know what, 16th gen Intel CPU, we're just going to leave it at that? The end.
So the problem with that is this angers
Apple
capitalism.
Gets like M5, and they're like, you know what?
Capital will be extremely unhappy if that happens, even if that might be the right thing to do. I mean, look at the geopolitical situation of the world right now. Look at the crisis of a number of rare earth metals and other specific things we need for chip manufacturing. And we need a lot of chips for things that don't have as good of a margin as this kind of stuff. So in a general tacit agreement of we don't need faster workstations for a decade might be better for the world, because I'm using a
They could just be like, the M5 is so stupid fast, we'll make a bunch, and then, you know what? Every once in a while, it'll be like a book that goes out of print. It's like, okay, when people need more computers, we'll just make more M5s.
The workstation I make GeekNights on, do VR, and play video games on is a 6th gen Intel i7 and a 1080 GPU.
Yeah, my computer is from 2018. It's 5 years old, right? It's a 1070 with an i7 8700. I think it's...
Yeah, I got a 6700K.
Right, it's like 4 or 5 generations of Intel chip behind what's current, right? And it still works just fine. I've been having some RAM issues lately. I had 32 gigs of RAM in there. I said, you know what? It's so inexpensive. I'm just going to add 32 more. I got 64 gigs of RAM in there. It cost me nothing to add that. And that's probably going to extend the life of this computer for like another year or two.
If it weren't for the fact that you cannot run Windows 11 on a 6th generation Intel...
Yeah, my 8700 is the oldest one that can run Windows 11. But
mine is
Windows 10 and Windows 11 aren't really... And only the user interface is different.
Oh, I don't even care at all other than security. Like, I don't want to not get security updates.
Still supported
until 2025, so I got some time still.
Yeah, so you got 2 years, right, until then.
I'm not planning to build a new computer until like the end of next year or maybe the following year.
We'll see.
But if I could run Windows 11 on this existing workstation with this current CPU architecture, I would just replace the power supply and the video card, and I'd be good for 7 or 8 more years easily. So maybe this would be a good thing, but as we discussed, this angers Capital. And I don't know what happens when Capital is angry in this regard. But anyway, things of the day. So I am a big fan of just one-off music videos that happen to be animated. I have a gigantic YouTube playlist that is just animated music videos. Not anime music videos, though there are many AMVs in that list. I just like...
talk about actual music videos, like the official music video for a song, but it happens to be that it was animated, such as, you know, Take On Me or Sledgehammer.
Both of those are in my playlist. Magnum Bullets, one of the recent ones that joined the playlist.
Any of the basically every song by that Prozac group that came up again recently that I forgot about for 20 years.
Yep. So Fleet Foxes has a lot of good ones too.
A few,
yep.
Right?
So what I present to you, Jonathan Young's Starship Velociraptor, and just watch it. This is anime homage Macross Bubblegum Crisis Gundam Akira, the music video. A little bit of Ghost in the Shell in there.
On Your Mark qualifies, I think.
Oh yeah, On Your Mark definitely qualifies. It was what was the name of that band? Anyway, that was a music video commissioned for a specific band that was popular at the time.
I guess. All right. My thing of the day. So, you know, keep it in the AI theme that's been going on and is going to keep going on for.
Yeah, I don't know what your thing of the day is. I opened it, but I didn't look at it. Now I'm looking at it.
So you click on it and you're just going to see a boring old in-browser text editor.
All right.
At the top right, it's like, hey, give us your, you know, OpenAI ChatGPT API key, right? So that we don't have to pay the bills for you using this. And basically, you give it your OpenAI API key in the top right, and you can check a box for chat to use GPT-4. And if you do that, it'll obviously be better, but also slower. And I don't know how the pricing works on any of that. But basically, what you do is you type in this box, right? English text, and then this text editor, merlin editor.vercel.app, will act as an editor, so you don't have to hire an editor. Like we're talking like, you know, not just your spell checks and your grammar checks, but like, I see you've used this, you keep using the same word over and over again. Try some different words, like an editor, right? A human editor. It is quite, you know, it's obviously imperfect as all the machine learning. You know, it's equal parts impressive and imperfect as you would expect from any of your other experiences with ChatGPT. But, you know, I think this is yet another example of a good use of it, right? It's like most people out there, right? This isn't taking work away from editors. Someone who writes a novel isn't going to be using this, right? Even if this improves tenfold, someone who writes a real book to be published, I guess, could use it if it was improved tenfold, maybe. But I think it's more likely that an actual editor would use it to make their own job easier. But also someone who writes English text, or maybe text in some other language, I don't know what languages it supports, who doesn't have an editor because you're just writing your own damn blog post, your own damn newsletter, your own comment on someone else's blog. You could get a pass from a virtual editor and improve the quality of the text you put into the world. And
you know what? It won't be perfect, just like, you know, I was testing Adobe Podcast. And you know what? It's only 90% as good as I am doing it myself, but...
That's a lot. How does that compare to doing nothing?
Exactly. So if I didn't...
this compared to a real, like the best editors on earth is obviously flawed. How does it compare to throwing up the text I wrote unedited?
Yep. And that point is something a lot of people are missing in the AI debate. They look at the flaws of these kinds of tools today and say things like, "Yeah, it can never replace a human." Oh, it is definitely going to replace a human.
Yes, it's like, you know, the artwork generator, right? It's like, is it taking a work away from an artist? And it's like, anyone who is going to pay an artist is still going to pay an artist. But me, I was going to use some Google image search, or I was going to draw something really hideous. So replacing my hideous drawing with a generated drawing that is superior is good.
Yeah.
As long as I'm not like lying about it or anything, you know.
In the meta moment, GeekNights Book Club book, The Satanic Verses. It's pretty good.
I'm more than halfway done, and I got to say now, right, is that, this is just, I guess if you went to a library or a bookstore, right, they would just qualify this as like adult fiction, right? It would be in that adult fiction section where like, the bestsellers are and such, right? But let's be honest with ourselves. This is a fantasy novel, right?
Oh yeah, this is
this is just a fantasy novel, right? This is very GeekNights appropriate. This shit goes on the shelf. It's not a series fantasy novel where there's gonna be multiple books. It's just a one booker. But you can put this on the shelf right next to all your dragons.
Oh, if you just put this on a fantasy shelf and someone picked it up and did not know any of the context in the world of the creation of this book, they would just think, oh, another fantasy novel. That was pretty good.
And I think, it's like William Gibson, he writes adult novels. They just happen to actually go in the sci-fi section, right? It's like William Gibson could easily try to get his novels in the adult fiction section that is separate from the nerd section of the bookstore, right? And no one would question that. And I think, God,
what was the quote? I remember I just remember from like high school, we were at a bookstore with like some friends of the family or whatever, and someone said something to the point of, the adult fiction section is mostly books about people going through a messy divorce and finding themselves.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, pretty good. If you haven't started reading it yet because of the weighty history and like geopolitics of this book, just pick it up, treat it like any old fantasy book.
None of those things appear in the text of the book.
Yeah. Did you read the previous book club book?
Yeah. If you didn't read Wikipedia or the news or know who Rushdie was or anything before reading this book, and you would just read like, a high quality fantasy novel.
If you didn't know, it'd be like if you read The Lord of the Rings and then found out that people were trying to kill Tolkien for 40 years because of it.
Right.
All right.
It's not, but even though it's fantasy novel, I think, it's not adventure-y. It's not adventure.
You know what?
Scenario.
You know what this book is? It is allegorical with a capital A that's underlined like 10 times.
And also, even though there is much magic and fantasy things happening, it takes place in the quote present, which is 1980X of the real world, right? So I think that might be what, almost every fantasy novel takes place in, some imaginary world that's not Earth, or most of them, right? Or some future or the distant past, whereas this took place in the present at the time it was published, and that'll help keep you out of the nerd section of the bookstore.
Yeah. All right, so we're not going to talk at least much about the aesthetics of fonts. We're going to talk about fonts as technology.
Episode already, I think, so we don't need to.
Though at the very end, right before the show, I thought real hard, and I made a list of my 5 favorite fonts. I'm sure I forgot something, but
I think I got 6 favorite fonts.
I forced myself to cut it down to 5, and it was hard. Someone didn't make the cut, but
anyway,
I bet we have exactly one that overlaps and only one. But anyway.
So anyway, fonts, technologically speaking, right, is okay. You want to, have a computer and you want text to appear on the computer, right? How the hell do we do this? Well, back in the day, right, there were basically like these hard-coded pixel fonts in ROMs.
You know what they were like? They were like sprite sheets in video games, basically.
Well, they were. It's like, whether you're using MS-DOS or, a BIOS on an old 90s computer or Final Fantasy 1 text, right? It's like there is a space in the ROM of the game, right? And there's basically a sprite sheet, right? Pixels that are like on and off. And it's like, this is what the letter A looks like, right? It's, these pixels are white and these ones are not white.
Yep.
Or black and the other ones are not black.
And that way the computer knows I'm rendering text. A letter A is going to go here. Let me just go fetch what a letter A looks like and stick that directly into the frame buffer.
You have some binary code, which was originally in the olden days ASCII, right? I don't even know what ASCII stands for, right? But basically, it's just a character mapping, right? It says this series of ones and zeros equals the letter A.
American Standard Code for Information Exchange.
Okay. Interchange? Or why? It's ASCII.
I mean, the fixed protocol stands for the Financial Information Exchange, so...
Okay, sure. Anyway. But it's very much like, the number 1 is this letter. The number 2 is this letter. The number 3 is this letter. So you have a series of numbers, right? And then a string in the computer's memory. And then a program comes along and says, okay, I have to draw those text on this, that memory over there, those bits. The program that I am says that those bits are text, and I'm going to draw that text on the screen. Let me go look at that memory, and it says number 1, and then I look up on the sprite sheet what letter that is, and I light up those pixels on the screen, and now you can see that letter, right? And that's how fonts worked and still work in a lot of computer things, right? It's really straightforward and simple. But there's so much to do with human languages and human alphabets that wasn't going to work forever, right?
Nope.
You got different languages, you got all sorts of different situations, with different, accent characters.
We moved away from computers whose sole ability to interact with the screen was a grid of very large blocks you could put sprites into.
Yeah. Computers had more memory and now could accommodate more letters. And also there's different typographic features, right? Where it's not necessarily true that just these are the X symbols. That's all the symbols there are, the end, right? There's all sorts of situations that we can discuss, at least some of them.
Yep.
Right?
Now, it's very important to internalize that fonts are the actual technology of fonts is very confusing and often obscure, and that is absolutely true. Don't feel like you're a dummy because you don't know how fonts work. I barely know how fonts work.
No, it's the people who know how to make fonts work use this, difficult to use software, and they craft fonts, and it's very painstaking, labor intensive work, and that's why they sell fonts for hundreds and hundreds of dollars.
Yep.
And it's like, because making a real font that actually covers all the bases is extremely difficult, especially if you get everything right. And there's a lot of free fonts out there, and free fonts, there's plenty of them, and a lot of them are terrific, but few of them are truly complete and comprehensive and totally correct, et cetera, et cetera.
And also, some of them are viruses, some of them are pirated.
That's only if you go to weird, shady websites.
Yeah. Also, that's less of a problem now, because one thing, most of you listening to Geek Nights are probably young enough to just live in a world where fonts kind of just work. That is not how Windows computers were for a long time.
Work until you try to do anything special with them and realize, oh, wait, these fonts are actually super basic fonts that don't do anything fancy.
Yup. Like, only in the last 6 or 7 years did Adobe fonts just work to the point that it literally just works. I don't think about it anymore.
You haven't tried to do any fancy font biz.
No, but I have. I studiously only use fonts that I can enable via Adobe because I pay for it, and I just stay away from everything else for the most part.
But I'm saying is even those fonts, a lot.
No, but I'm saying even that used to not work. Like Windows 3.1, good fucking luck installing a font.
Well, Windows fonts were different then.
Yeah.
Right?
Windows 95, they were different. Windows 2000, they were different.
Right.
Fonts are only relatively recently generally standardized in terms of how computers use them.
Well, there's the open type fonts, right? Is basically they came up with a standard called open type. And whether it's a true type font or an OTF, they're slightly different in the headers and some other reasons, but basically they're all following this open type font standard, which is the core of all modern fonts. And what a font is nowadays technologically is a file, and in the file are shapes, right? It's not just pixels. It's like a vectorized shape that matches a particular Unicode character code, right? ASCII only had so many characters. Unicode encompasses all of ASCII and then a shit ton more, including emojis and every character from every alphabet and every language and even more. And there's empty space in it that for more characters that people come up with. And that's why you see new emojis coming out occasionally.
Yeah.
Right? And so if you want to make a complete font, your font has to encapsulate every character from every alphabet in every language in all of Unicode. It's almost no fonts actually cover all of it. right? Maybe there might even be 0 fonts that do that, right? I know some fonts like fill in like, you know, if a font is primarily for one language, like that, you know, they'll just take an existing font that covers like all of Unicode and just redo the characters that they care about, right, in their language. And that way, at least if characters appear in some other language in someone's text, the font will just be different. That happens sometimes. But yeah, you have to draw all these shapes, and then you have to put special instructions, right, to handle all sorts of weird situations and some non-weird situations. Non-weird situations being, well, bold, right? How do you do bold? A lot of times you just draw another shape that's like, well, this is the shape when it's not bold, and this is the shape when it's bold, right? Use 2 different shapes. And then it's like, all right, it's italic. Well, okay, I'm going to draw the shape a 3rd time. This is what it looks like when it's italic. It's like you're drawing the shapes over and over again. And then you get the weird situations, right? We're talking about things like ligatures, right? It's like, okay, someone wrote the letter lowercase t. Well, okay, good. And then they wrote another lowercase t that immediately follows it. It's like, well, you know, if you have 2 lowercase t's next to each other, it's pretty common to like draw 2 sticks and have 1 line across both.
Now, that's not going to fly with like a monospace sprite sheet font.
Right. That's what, you know, if you just put 2 separate lowercase t's next to each other with like a gap in between, it's like, it's going to look weird, right? It's not wrong. It's, you know, or anything like that. It just doesn't look right. That's not how typography works, even though, right, that would be easy for computers to work. So there's a thing called a ligature, which detects when, you know, there are certain combinations of characters adjacent to each other in certain patterns, and it will replace, right, the characters, you know, the shapes that would normally be there with yet another shape, right? 2 T's next to each other, or you know, all kinds of other. That's just the first one that comes to mind, but there's quite a few of them. Right, and that you got situations like there's capital letters and lowercase letters. Some languages have uppercase and lowercase, some don't.
Yep.
Right?
Turkish, because I spent a lot of time in Turkey. You can have I with and without the dot, and you can capitalize I with and without the dot.
Yep. One of my favorite things this is something I really, you know, once I learned about it, it really bothers me because I want to use it. Almost no fonts support it correctly, right? But when you look at like professionally typeset text, you see it all the time. And it's like, I want to be able to do that, but to get a font that can do it is usually either very limited in your choices or it's very expensive. And that is small caps, right? So there's in the open type font, you know, format, right? If you get an actual, I guess Apple computers, you can open up like the fancy font dialog and see these options. I know in InDesign, you can open it. I guess in your web browser, if you use CSS, you can access all the open type font flags to enable and disable font features. But basically, there's all these features that you can explicitly enable or disable on a font if the font supports those features, right? So small caps is basically saying like, okay, here's the letter O, lowercase. Here's the letter O, uppercase. But there's also small caps, which is like, okay, you're going to render it the way it's rendered as when it's uppercase, which is not the same, right? Like you think a capital T, the cross is on the top of the bar, right? Whereas a lowercase t, the cross is in the middle. But a small caps will be, the bar will be at the top because it's an uppercase letter, but it'll be short because it's small. It won't be like this big T, right? And it's common to use small caps for like a heading centered on like a section or table headers or other. If you read books, and you start thinking about small caps, like you'll see them a lot. And it's like, but now go try to type them on your computer.
Yeah.
You go to your text editor, your InDesign even if you have it, and you go to the open type or CSS and you enable the open type font feature flag SMCP small cap, right? And you'll notice, okay, all the letters are now capitals and they're clearly smaller than the actual capital letters, right? But something is off about them. They don't look the way they do when people use small caps in books, right? And that's because almost all software, when told to do small caps, will just take the actual capital letters and shrink them down, right? Which is actually not correct. The spacing will be off. Basically, everything about those will be off.
Yep.
Actual small caps are another set of shapes with their own rules for spacing and whatever to look correct. And almost no fonts come with actual small caps
Yep.
So it's like, and that's just one of many, open type font feature flags. Other ones are like old style numerals. You ever see like the threes hang low? Like you'll often see those used in a book for page numbers.
Yep.
Right? Where like the 3 will have a little curl at the bottom of it, and they won't just be lined up straight. Like the numbers will be at different elevations, some hanging low, some up high. People will do that for like the address on their house. They'll have like the numbers not in a straight line. So you need to have a font that supports old style numerals.
Yep.
It's just so much shit that goes into making a correct font, right? And then even if you sorted out all that shit, right? Then you got to worry about the hinting. Right? Back in the day, we had CRT monitors where all the text, where basically everything was a little bit blurry because every phosphor on the screen was a little bit blurry, right? They weren't crisp, right? So you could just render your font as straight up pixels, and when it showed up on the screen, it looked kind of nice. And it was all good.
See, also, sprites, and why hard sprites on modern displays are not how anyone ever intended those old games to look.
Right? But now we got an LCD screen. And an LCD screen, everything is a square, right? And even though we've made those squares really, really, really small nowadays, they're still squares. And if you just render a font the old way, with no anti-aliasing, no nothing, on an LCD screen, it looks pixely AF, and it looks bad, and looks awful, right? So they've got this thing called hinting, right? Where, as the font gets bigger and smaller, right? Well, it's like, you're okay. There might be a diagonal in the font, in the letter somewhere, like a letter A, capital A has a diagonal, right? So it's like, okay, well, do you just make a staircase of pixels that are on and off? It'll look bad, right? You want to make it look like a smooth, sharp angle, right? On both sides of the letter A or the V or the W or any kind of angular thing or curved thing as well. What you end up doing is you want to turn on parts of pixels, right? The pixels in the LCD are arranged. Is it red, green, then blue, or green in order?
Fuck if I remember.
There's 3 colors in order, right? So it's like, all right, well, even though obviously the letter is all black against a white background, what if on that pixel, on that sort of angle there, we just turn on the red part a little bit, right? And it's like, and we know the red, we know that the blue is on the right side of the pixel, and we know the red is on the left side of the pixel. So we'll just turn on those edge pixels, some of the colors, right? And we can make the thing look really sharp without necessarily everything just being, black, right? And a staircase. And so you have to put all this hinting information into the font so that the font renderer, it has some knowledge in it, whether it's like the Microsoft TrueType or whatever. It has to have some hints, right? That's why it's called a hint. You're sort of in the font, you're giving a hint to the font renderer. Here is the best way to make these letters look good on an LCD. Help me out here. And if you don't do this, everything looks like garbage. And that's why for many years, and even still today, a lot of people are like, hey, why do fonts look so good on Apple devices and not so good on other devices? It's like they were better at this earlier than other people.
The rendering doesn't matter what good font you use. If it's rendered the wrong way, it's gonna look weird. And beyond that, what about the technology of like, if you want to put a font on a website, that's actually way more complex than it used to be. You can't just assume everyone has the font that you want.
Well, it depends, right? So if you're making a website, in your CSS, you can put the names of fonts you want to use, right? And if someone on their computer happens to have one of those fonts, then sure enough, the web browser, if it's allowed to, will try to use that font.
Yep.
Right?
And you give them a priority, and it uses the first one on the list that it can do.
Exactly. But you can also provide a WAF file, right? Which is basically just another sort of format of open type font, right? You can even provide just OTF files if you wanted to, but you use WAF files like the standard. And so you put these font files somewhere available, and you then put in your CSS, you say, all right, listen up, web browser. There's a font. It's called Scott's font. The WAF file for it is here, right? And if you want to use it for this text, right, that's my top priority. Please use that one. You can't force them to, but you sort of tell them to. And you can also tell them, oh, by the way, enable these ligatures, and all your open type font flags also go in there. And the weight of the font, the spacing of the font, the kerning of the font, the height, the line spacing, all this, you can put everything in there.
But then some jerk in their web browser might have just said, yeah, use Arial for every website. I don't care. And no one will ever see it. Arial?
Arial?
I've
never heard anyone say Arial.
I've never heard anyone say the name of that font out loud before.
It's just Arial?
It's not like it's a bad font. It's not like I use it.
Right. Sure is. But yeah, it's like, it's tough. And then there's the other problem is that nowadays a lot of people there have been, some various privacy issues, right, regarding fonts in web browsers, right? And there's two tricks that have been used that I'm aware of. I think there's probably others. The first trick is that they used to be able to figure out like what fonts were on your computer, right? And, most people only have like the default system fonts. And so all those people would look basically the same.
But you got a weird font. You're pretty easy to track now.
Right. If you install a different font, it's like, okay, well, it's like if you have these fonts, if you have the standard fonts plus this one extra weird font installed in your computer, that's probably unique among computers. That specific combination of fonts. So if the web browser can look up a list of the fonts that your computer has, now they can uniquely identify you across the whole internet. It's like you visit another website and they're like, oh, that's Scott. We just saw him on that other website that has ad tracking. So as long as you block all ad tracking shit, this won't get you. But if you don't, and you installed even one custom font, it's like that's now a uniquely identifying thing. I think web browsers may have also made changes to sort of prevent that, maybe, but it was a thing if it's not still a thing.
Another thing. Okay, because I got a third thing.
No, the second thing is that they'll make a website that just uses a weird font, right? And it's like, the font itself is now tracking, right? That, the font, it's like your web browser, you told it, whenever I go to a website, right, download the fonts and use the ones that they tell me to use. Okay, well, now these 10 websites all use the same font file on the same font server, and they see that you visit the website, and that, oh, you've already got the font, you're not requesting it again. You must have already visited one of my 10 shady websites.
Yeah.
Right? Clearly, I now know who you are, right? Mr. already has my shady font, right?
On the publishing side, a lot of people have been caught in shenanigans when Microsoft Word changed its default font to Calibri, because that font didn't exist in public until 2007. So if someone purports to have a document from before 2007 and it is in the Calibri font, they're definitely lying. And a number of big court cases and big things have been solved by the fact that the default Microsoft Word font was in a document that was purported to be from before Microsoft released that font.
Yep. So yeah, I guess, the business of getting font files, right, is like there are free fonts, which I already mentioned. You really want to get, some open sourcey ones. The thing is, most of the open sourcey fonts are going to be, monospace fonts that programmers made for themselves, right? The one font that, you go to Google Fonts or whatever, or, something like that, and you can find fonts there. But a lot of the free fonts are like not actually very good. There's a reason that they're free.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, sure, you can use them and they might look nice for whatever small time thing you're doing. But as soon as you try to do anything that's serious, you want to enable any of those open type features, you want to actually render, produce an actual work of text that's somewhat fancy or, typographically correct in any way. And a lot of those fonts just collapse immediately. They're like, nope, I can't do that nicely. I can't do that nicely. It doesn't matter how much you fiddle with me. It's never going to look nice if you try to Photoshop with me because I'm not a fancy font. I'm some free font you got from somewhere. Right? And the free fonts that support all those features are a few. You'll only have a few choices. But one font that's free that I can suggest. It's not one of my favorite fonts. It's just a free, sans serif font that has a lot of features, not all of them. It doesn't have the small caps. It's called Inter by Rasmus Anderson. So if you just want some, sans serif text and you want a free font, then, there you go. But if you want fonts that look real nice, you're gonna have, and you're actually gonna be doing some professional work with them, printing up something or working for a business or whatever. You got to pay for fonts, and the prices are outrageous.
Yep. Now, a good middle ground. You know what I do?
Outrageous.
I pay for Adobe, and Adobe has Adobe fonts, and you cannot do anything with every font, but the license terms are pretty good and pretty understandable compared to
fonts. Most of those fonts, though, are just free fonts also, right? That just happen to be in there with all the other ones.
But they do just work in the Adobe stuff.
Yeah, but the problem is a lot of those fonts, like I said, if you actually try to do any serious typographical work, a lot of them just don't support the fancy features.
Yep.
They're very bare bones fonts. You have to, if you want fonts that actually do all the things correctly, your choices are limited if you don't pay money.
So I guess as we've gone on long, my favorite fonts, Calibri, I actually do really like the default word font. It's a fine font. It's very utilitarian. My favorite sans serif font is still Source Sans Pro. I've loved that thing for a long time. I use it in a lot of stuff. I think it's a really good font. Berkeley Mono, the one that you
did you pay for that also?
Oh yeah, that's a fucking amazing font.
Okay. I've been using that for my programming since it was a thing of the day.
It's so stylish, and it feels really good.
Cross that off my list. They're going to make a new font. At least they said they were. We'll see if they actually do.
I do like Futura. It's a kind of a basic.
Futura is also on my list. That's the 2001 Space Odyssey title card font, right?
And my last one is one that is definitely not on your list, and I like it for reasons. Highway Gothic. That is the font of almost all road signs in the Western Hemisphere.
Oh, okay. No one cares about that.
It's a cool font because it's designed for legibility, and it's got some stuff going on. It is neat, and I recommend reading about it. But to be clear, do not use that in your essay.
So the fonts that are on my list that Rim didn't mention, right? So there's Charter. Charter is actually a free font, right? That is excellent. I don't know if the free one has all the options in it. But basically, it's the text that looks like text you would find in if you got a paperback novel.
I was about to say, this looks like the text in a textbook from 1978 that I would read.
If you just buy a paperback novel off the shelf, right? And it's you look at the body text, it's very, it probably might not be exactly Charter, but it's really similar. It's and it's a free, easy to get,
designed in 1987 to be able to survive repeated faxings.
Yep. So that's a good one, right?
That is a good one.
There's another one is the probably one of the most classic and famous fonts is Cooper Black. This is I am making a poster for my funky concert. Right? But you have seen this font, literally everywhere in your life, right? The sort of bulby, 70s disco-y kind of style font. This is used everywhere you look. Once you realize the name of this font and what it looks like, it's one of those things where now you can't not notice it, right? It was a quiet part of your life that was, familiar to you. You just didn't have a name for it or recognize it. And once you know Cooper Black, you see Cooper Black everywhere. But the reason you see it everywhere is because it's so good, right? It didn't become everywhere for no reason.
Wouldn't want to read a book written in it, but
No, that's not for that. Then, right, so there's the Helveticas of the world, of which Arial is that one, right? Now there are a lot of ones that are like, newer, like I guess Helvetica New, Neue, right?
I'm not a big fan, to be honest.
But there are like, there's so many versions of Helveticas, right? Of things that people have done with it, tried to improve it, update it, tweak it slightly. And it's, to the untrained eye, it's really hard to tell any difference between a lot of them. You're like, that's the same font. And it's like, well, and then someone shows you the letters side by side and you're like, okay, I see that one is crooked slightly so. Right? But, the newer ones, while I think they've taken a lot of more recent, typographical learnings, at least for me and my eyeballs, I appreciate like some of the older ones I think are more styling. So there's, I guess the two are like Universe, which doesn't have an E at the end. It's just like Universe, right? And there's also Accidens Grotesque. They're basically like the old original real deal, Helveticas. And if you take the same text and put it in your regular everyday Helvetica next to these older ones, you'll see that they got a little bit more styling to them.
Ooh, apparently most of the old school ones you're talking about are classified as neo-grotesque sans serifs.
That's correct. That's what
and almost all the ones that are popular were made by a small number of people in 1957.
Yep. And then, the styling font, my last font here, is Avant-Garde Gothic, right? Which is basically you opened up a old styling.
Oh, that's a good one. That is a good one.
A fashion magazine, right? Or a magazine with some kind of cool spread, right? And the fanciness, the fancy font is all over it.
This would be in like the pull quote and the title, but not in like the body of the text in the magazine.
Right. The coolest thing is, if you want to mess around with open type font features, right? If you want to mess around with the ligatures feature, Avant-Garde Gothic has a fuck ton of cool ligatures. Like if you put like certain, like the letter P followed by the letter like R, I think there's a bunch of different letter combinations where you can make it do funky stuff by combining two like big letters at the start of your sentence. You can make it do like, like the letter A with like a backwards, like not italics, but like weird slants. And then you could, that way, like you can make like the right side of the letter A straight vertically, and then followed by, let's say, the letter H, right? I don't know, ahoy. You want to write ahoy.
I mean, go to the Wikipedia article about it, and it just has the word avant-garde, and it is showing off half the things you're talking about in one set of words.
Yeah.
The G is like overlapped with the A in such a perfect way. Everything's lined up so nice. Everything's touching.
ITC avant-garde. Yeah, and you can see here they show you all the companies that use it as their font, right? In their logo. I think the most famous one is Remax, the US
Well, interesting, because Century 21 is what came to mind first, and they both use it and they both compete with each other.
Right, but like in Remax, their logo, you can see the sort of slant aligning thing where like they have the letter M slanted forward, right, and then the letter A vertical on the left half, so it lines up.
Well, Century 21, the C is big, and they have the C just merged directly into the line that starts the E that's at an angle now.
Yep. But you even look at something like, the Macy's logo is using the same font, even though it's just a lowercase letters with a star instead of an apostrophe, right?
Oh, I didn't know. I never clocked that PBS uses it because they don't use any of the fancy features.
Right. It's like, well, the thing is, one of the other things about the font is that a lot of the letters, especially the lowercase ones, right, are circular and they're like the same circle. So like if you write like OC, like occur, the O and the C are basically the same shape, except the C has like a little bite taken out the right side of it, right? And then like if you put OCP, the circle on the P will be the same circle, right? Only with a stick hanging down.
Now that is bad for legibility of long amounts of text, but that is great for style.
Right, it looks like, a bunch of just circles in a row that are all exactly identical with like just one little thing different about them, right? And so it's a very fancy and clever font.
And I think that's a good point to stop.
Mm.
Because we went for almost an hour and 20 minutes. All right.